Once upon a time, in a small African village, there lived a young orphan girl named Adama. Her parents died in a car accident, leaving young Adama to her uncles and aunt. Her uncles shared her parents' properties after their death. Adama was given out to her aunt, who lived in a distant village. Adama at that young age knew no one could replace her parents. However, she was grateful to be given out to that particular aunt of hers. This is because she normally bought her candies anytime she visited their home, and spoke calmly and lovingly to her. Little did she know what was to befall her, the situation she was going into for the rest of her life. Though providing shelter, Aunt Adama treated Adama with cruelty and disdain. She was never allowed to eat in the house until she was done with all her chores of cleaning the house sparkling clean, including the rooms of her 3 cousins. She was deemed unfit to eat with the same bowls used by the whole family, and thus was served food in her hands or a polythene bag, which was often thrown at her. Adama's cousins, spoilt and selfish, joined in mistreating her, assigning her the most arduous chores and showering her with insults and mockery. Sometimes she was made to sleep outside in the cold, while everyone enjoyed their cozy beds. Despite the harsh treatment, Adama still saw her aunt and cousins as family, the only family she had. The young girl remained resilient, softer and prayerful. She prayed for her aunt, who she now saw as her mother, and for her cousins, who were now seen as siblings, as she was an only child. Finding solace in the simple joys of nature and the kindness of a few villagers who showed her compassion, she held on to a belief instilled by her late mother, that patience and perseverance would bring about better days. One day, while tending to her aunt's ghost on the outskirts of the village, Adama came across an old woman seated beneath a baobab tree. She wondered to herself what such an old woman would be doing in the forest at that time, as it was still very dark for anyone to be out there. The woman's face was weathered but kind, and her eyes held the depth of wisdom. Adama greeted the weary woman and asked if she could help in any way. The old woman relayed that she just came from fetching firewood and feels a little tired, therefore decided to rest before continuing her journey. Adama gave the old woman her bottle of water, which normally takes her till evening on days she is out in the field. She helped carry the firewood to the old woman's hut. The old woman thanked her and told her she was a good girl and good things would find her throughout life. Knowing what she was going through, this put some hope in Adama's heart, and she held the old woman's hands for some time before releasing it. In the moment she held the woman's hands, memories of her dead mother swept through her mind. She sobbed silently and turned to leave. The old woman smiled at her and handed Adama a bead flute and bid her goodbye. Encouraged by the old woman's words and her kindness, Adama returned to her daily tasks with renewed determination. She endured her aunt's cruelty with grace, focusing on her chores and finding moments of joy in the beauty of the natural world around her. Adama went everywhere with the flute that was gifted to her by the old woman, always making sure to hide it from the sight of her aunts and cousins. Soon, she learned how to play the flute, and every time she played, she felt more calm, happy and full. Months turned into years, and Adama grew into a very beautiful woman, more beautiful than her cousins. She outgrew the dress she first wore into the village, but she had no money to get another, and her aunt had not bought her any since she stepped into her household. Some of the villagers gave her old clothes, and sometimes she washed their clothes for pennies and food. Her aunt threw out the clothes that made her look beautiful, leaving her with the tattered ones. One day, a severe drought struck the village, threatening the crops and livelihoods of its inhabitants. Half of the goats Adama reared, half of the goats she looked after, were swallowed in the drought, and she received severe beatings with every passing goat. Adama was less concerned about the beatings. She found it extremely difficult to get water whenever she was out in the fields with her animals. She was now going days without water. Even in her aunt's household, food was becoming a problem, and she got little or none at all, regardless of finishing her chores. Her daily struggles and preoccupations made her forget about the flute. One sunny afternoon, as she was off in the woods, going from one end to another, she remembered her old flute and reached into her pocket for it. The flute looked more beautiful from when last she played it. The flute fell to the ground as she was turning it round and round to look at it. Adama took it and dusted it and started to play the flute with closed eyes, taking in every sound and reveling in it. Immediately she opened her eyes. Fruits of different kinds surrounded her, and she started salivating. The young lady was so happy and ate to her fill. After Adama was done eating, she looked around for water, but there was none, and she played the flute again, and it started raining around her. The goats were happy as they started jumping and shaking their bodies. The young girl was elated and drank to her fill, as did the goats. She decided to run home with the good news. On the way home, she found a group of starved children. She couldn't leave them in that state, so she played the flute. Again, food of different kinds came out, and the children started eating and rejoicing. They were soon joined by their parents. Before she could get to her aunt's house, word got to the king. The king summoned her to his almost dying household. Adama played the flute again and again for the king's household to eat to their fill. The king's joy was beyond measure. He summoned the whole village and asked her to play for everyone to have a feast. She was praised and elevated to a higher status by the king for saving him and his household. The old king asked her to remain in his household by marrying his son, the prince who would soon succeed him. The king added that with her beside his son, this cherished village will prosper, and he will be able to rest well in his grave. The prince was also attracted to Adama and convinced her to accept the arrangements. When her aunt and cousins heard of her good fortune, they didn't know how to approach her. They thought she would have their heads or even banish them from the village. Instead, she did nothing of such. She told them revenge would only make her worse than them, so she forgave them. However, she kept a keen eye on them and never made them come very close to her household.